Joining us from Washington, D.C., we have Antoine van Agtmael, chairman of Ashmore EMM, where he oversees nearly $10 billion in assets. Antoine, good to have you back. First off, let's talk about the U.S. We got the Beige Book and people calling for a double dip, considering the latest manufacturing numbers that we got, and also, of course, very disappointing jobs numbers. But how long do you think things in the markets and the economy are going to be shaky for?
Well, I think, first of all, that we're not going to have a double dip. If you define double dip as another recession coming up, I do believe that growth here in the U.S. and, in fact, in most of the developed world, as you already said, is going to be pretty anemic in the 2% range. And so emerging markets look pretty good by comparison, although I think the word for this year is slowing everywhere. I think growth will be slowing everywhere. Growth of the economies, growth of earnings, and later this year, I think, growth of inflation will be slowing a bit.
Growth and inflation will be slowing a bit. Okay, so that means no interest rate increase then from the Fed for this year and maybe beyond. But what about Europe? Talk to me about those debt concerns. The market seems to be relieved, at least for now, that another bailout package for Greece has been agreed to, so no default in sight. But how do you see the situation in Europe playing out, and have those concerns been fully priced into the market now?
Well, I think all of these things are just postponing the agony. And ultimately, you have to deal with deleveraging. We have to deal with deleveraging in the United States. Here it's in housing and government debt. And in Europe, it is with the debt of these countries in the south. And so that's going to happen. And that means, for the coming couple of years, slow growth. The question is, will it lead to sudden, unexpected problems? I think with all of these measures, that at least the chance of that is a little bit less.
So the chance is a little bit less, but it's still there. What do you think the chances are of default in the Eurozone and maybe even the EU breaking up?
Oh, I don't think that will happen, but Greece will test it, I think. And they'll have to come up with all kinds of fancy footwork to solve the problems there and in Portugal and in Ireland. And of course, Spain has its own set of problems, although not quite as severe as you have in the other three countries. So okay. I don't think we have turned the corner yet.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Considering we have slowing growth, deleveraging taking place in the developed world, have you been, say, holding more cash in response? Have you been putting more money into emerging markets? What have you been doing with the portfolio?
Well, basically, emerging markets have had practically no return this year, 1% or something like that. When clients give us money, they do it under the understanding that we are fully invested. So we never hold more cash than 1% or so. We have shuffled the portfolio around a little bit. And rather than being overweighted in the big markets, the BRICs, we are overweighted in some of the other countries, and particularly in some places that people don't know very well, like Africa and the Middle East, where, of course, there were lots of troubles, but where the price of oil is strong, where the wealth is very high, and we believe actually the outlook is pretty good.
Okay, but have you discounted the political uprisings, of course, the political problems we've seen in the Middle East and Africa?
I believe it has. The Egyptian market was down well over 20%. The Bahraini market is down. Yemen and Libya, of course, are not markets in which people invest. The critical question there is what's going to happen in Saudi Arabia, and I'm not too pessimistic about that. I think they will hold things together, and as long as that's the case, we'll be fine. If that's not the case, then there are problems everywhere.
Yeah, there are problems everywhere. So you're saying you've been underweight the big BRIC economies. Is that what I heard? Is that because of overheating concerns, serious risk of inflation, again, not being able to be tackled by the governments?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a question of valuation as well. If you take China, for example, yes, there we do have a concern, not so much of a huge exploding bubble. And there are all kinds of scenarios always in which people forecast the instant demise. I don't believe in those scenarios at all. But I do believe in somewhat of a slowing. I believe that they have to be a bit more forceful on their monetary policy. I think there are going to be more rate increases. I think that exports are going to slow down a little bit over the coming months. So all of that is a scenario with limited upside.
Okay, one more question for you, Antoine, because you are the man who, of course, coined the term emerging markets. And right now, emerging markets want a bigger say at the IMF. Why is it that we don't have a valid emerging markets candidate right now? Does that, I guess, ensure that Lagarde will win the top of the IMF?
Well, I think if this would have been 2 years later, I think there would have been an emerging markets candidate. But this all came rather suddenly, as you may remember, so they didn't quite have their act together. There's one, I think, viable emerging markets candidate, Carstens from Mexico, who has really an excellent resume, but so does the French candidate, who is now, of course, touring around emerging markets to drum up support. In the end, I would love to see an emerging market managing director of the IMF. But if I read the tea leaves correctly, I think it's not going to happen this year around, but you never know.
All right, Antoine, thanks for joining us today. Always a pleasure. As Antoine van Agtmael, some have called him the godfather of emerging markets, of course, the man who coined the term, and he's the chairman of Ashmore EMM.